Let's talk about proxy wars and why they failed America this time. Proxy wars and why they failed America this time. What is proxy war? Proxy war essentially means fighting by proxy, getting someone else to do, so to say, your dirty job, getting someone else to put their lives on the line, getting soldiers of other countries, other nationalities, other ethnicities, to fight wars that are of tactical or strategic importance to you instead of sacrificing your own sons, your own soldiers, your own blood. You see, prior to this Iran America war, America had perfected, so to say, the what do you call it? The concept of proxy wars. So much so that for every critical war they want to go into, there is always a population, there was always a group, there is always, an ethnicity different from Americans that are actually ready and willing and adequately motivated to go fight the war on their behalf. I'll give you classic examples. When America was going to take down the regime of Bashar al Assad in Syria, they used almost no American soldiers. Who did they use instead? They used the HTS, Hayat Tahrir al Sham, led by the now president of Syria, Abu Ahmed al Julani, who had some Syrians at his beck and call, but who was also able to hornet's nest, able to gather fighters from practically almost every Muslim country that matters in the world under the umbrella of a HTS. They did not just use HTS and nationals of other countries. They also used fighters from the Kurds, particularly the Syrian Kurds, under the umbrella of the YPG. mm. The YPG, you remember, are allies of the Kurds that are fighting the Turkish government, the Kurds that are fighting the Iraqi government, the Kurds that are fighting the Iranian government, and some other governments in that ecosystem. So it was the Kurds, the Syrians, and folks from several other countries like Turkmen, like the Uyghurs, like Turks, like all sorts of nationalities that came together to actually prosecute the strategic security interest of America and Israel in pushing Bashar al Assad from power and rendering Syria essentially vulnerable to whatever America and Israel wanted to make of it. That is a classic example of proxy wars. Now, when the Iran versus American war started, America fiddled with the idea of a ground invasion, you know, into Iran. Again, because they want to capture the government, they want a regime change. They want to push out all the mullahs and the ayatollahs, so to say, and they also want to take charge. They want to snatch, their critical nuclear infrastructure, particularly the 60% enriched uranium. So the first guys they went to that they wanted them to help them to prosecute the proxy wars were the Kurds. Unfortunately, those ones refused blatantly, the Iranian and Iraqi courts. Why did they refuse? Because they just had a particularly painful experience of working for America and American interests in Syria. It is still fresh, it is a fresh wound on their bodies and their minds. You see, like I said, the courts helped America to push Bashar al Assad away. However, immediately Bashar al Assad was pushed away, the Americans essentially betrayed the courts in favor of al Julani. Al Julani invaded the Kurdish areas, in Syria, took over, the government, took over the critical oil infrastructure of Syria that was there, and essentially displaced and then, cowed and then essentially pressed down the Kurds. Unlike what the Kurds were expecting, that the Americans will help them carve out that part of Syria and essentially give them autonomy over that part of Syria, and they will essentially be controlling the crown jewel of the economy of Syria, which was the oil infrastructure that was situated in that environment. Unfortunately, it worked against their expectations, and the Julani regime actually submerged and was made to essentially swallow the courts. That was a very raw deal. that they did not forgive America for. Unfortunately for America, shortly after that disappointment, after that so-called betrayal of the courts, they needed the courts to help them again invade a much more aggressive, powerful, and capable fighting force in Iranian soldiers. The court said no because of the memory of the treatment in Syria, and that is one of the major reasons why America has still not fathomed or gone on with as in with a ground invasion of Iran till date. Now, on the Strait of Hormuz, America also now needed nationals of other countries to essentially follow them into the Strait of Hormuz to go and take the risk of near certain death from the fighting capacities and capabilities of Iranian sailors that have been lined up in hardened bunkers under the rocks that are situated on the Iranian coast. We are talking of countries like Bandar Azim, cities like Bandar Abbas, where some of the most important ports and naval infrastructure, both military and civilian, of Iran are. In fact, America didn't just want its European allies to follow them, they also even wanted China to come and do the fighting. And because of reasons I have stated in my previous videos, not just China, but even the European and Asian allies said no. For those two reasons, America has not been able to kick in its proxy war infrastructure that it has used to prosecute and sometimes win the wars of the past. Because of that, it now has to depend on its own white American soldiers, 13 of which have been killed already in action against the Iranians. As we speak, close to 8,000 American Marines are on their way on the waters, coming to come and do battle for the soul of the Strait of Hormuz and the Harish Island, where much of the loading of crude oil of Iran emanates from. So this time around, it is not going to be the Iranians versus the proxies of Americans. It is going to be the Iranian versus the Americans themselves. And trust me, it is not looking good for President Trump. Both at the level of the military theater at the Strait of Hormuz and the Harish Island, but also at the level of internal politics in the United States of America. If you've been following my videos, I hope you go back. You will also know that it carries using actually American soldiers to prosecute this coming war is very politically costly and may cost President Trump not just the rest of his of his tenure as American president, but even the fortunes of the Republican Party as they proceed into the next presidential elections in 2028, and even the midterm elections that are going to happen later this year in November. And that is why America lost its capacity for proxy war infrastructure and fighters in this war. Again, don't forget to like, to share, to follow, to comment, and please ask your questions out and I will gladly answer them. See you in the next video.